I'm super excited to invite our next hosts up. We have Jamie Arkin and Hannah Blackwell from Method. So, woo! Let's hear it! Yeah! There we go. I love it. So, Jamie is a front end developer who comes out of the Denver studio and has a background in print publication. She is a Syracuse graduate. So, congratulations. And then Hannah is a senior software engineer, a UNC Chapel Hill. Do we have any UNC folks in the house? Seriously, in Charlotte, you guys. And she is, if you'll believe this or not, a premier aerialist in the area. So if you've ever had the opportunity to hang from the silks or get really excited in one of those Groupon opportunities or workouts, they're going to come talk to us today about something that I think is a theme that we have here at Fleurix. We're always talking about mentorship, but what about sponsorship? They're going to talk to us about being over mentored and under sponsored. Please help me welcome Jamie and Hannah up to the stage.
All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to our talk. And thank you, Sage, for the lovely intro there. So yeah, we're here today to talk to you all about relationships at work, different kinds of professional relationships you can have, and how they can help you along in your career. So specifically, we're going to talk about mentoring and sponsoring and how much the latter can do for you if you have the difference between them in your head and make sure both are in your life. So before we get started, though, we're going to introduce ourselves again. We'll be brief since Sage gave us such a lovely lead in there. But yeah, we're two engineers at Method. So Jamie is, Sage said, just a total badass on the front end, especially in React. She loves exploring new cities and taking super good care of her plants out in Denver, where she lives.
And this is Hannah. Hannah is a charismatic, brilliant software engineer with this innate ability to streamline processes in organizations. Hannah is a creative at heart, and it shows through her incredibly talented aerialist dancing skills with ab core muscles for days and a perfect red lipstick. We are here today presenting to you because of her passion for helping those around her and initial research into sponsorship.
All right, let's get going. So before we get into the benefits of sponsorship, it's going to be helpful for us to tell you all what we mean by that. And to do that, we are going to compare it to a term that a lot of folks are familiar with, which is the idea of a mentor. So when we talk about a mentor, we're talking about someone who offers you guidance. So it's someone who's going to give you advice, someone with whom you build a trusting relationship. This is someone who you're going to need to be able to feel vulnerable with so that you can open up to them and receive the best advice that they can give you from their experiences in the field. A mentor does not have to be someone who is above you in a hierarchy. It could be someone who's a peer, just someone who has maybe some insight or experience that you haven't had and is willing to share that with you. And the last note here, that the returns of mentorship are intangible. So this is advice that you get, your mentor gives it to you, and then you go off into the world and apply it, or don't, as you see fit. A sponsor, by contrast, is going to be someone more focused on making you visible. So this is someone who is going to fiercely advocate for you in your career, someone who really sees you and your skill set, sees the value that you already bring, not so much the opportunities to teach you, but what you already have, and helps highlight that to others. They're going to talk about you to other folks. This is someone who, when they can, gives you opportunities, which means that they're usually someone who has some sort of influence. Often there's someone at the capital T table in your organization. So someone who can get you in the door on those good projects, promote you, talk about giving you raises, any sort of upward mobility opportunities. And from that last description, you probably gather that this is a relationship with a pretty tangible quid pro quo. So your sponsor is going to speak up on your behalf, and then you are going to do them proud by delivering hard on whatever opportunity they've gotten for you. Before we continue, just want to highlight this middle section, that both of these relationships are totally awesome things to have in your career. We encourage everyone to have them. We're not trying to say that one is better than the other, just focusing on an aspect that some folks don't think about as much.
While advice and guidance are great tools to grow, getting visibility and opportunities are vital to advance. Sponsorship matters to all,
And for further information on that note, we're going to talk about the D&I perspective on this a little bit. So what we find in the research on sponsorship versus mentorship, which has really been a field people have started getting into in the last decade or so here, is that women and minorities are consistently over-mentored and under-sponsored. So what we mean by that is that men in the workplace, particularly white men, tend to be given more championing, more advocacy for their abilities. They tend to be put on riskier projects, while women and minorities tend to receive more advice and guidance and learning or training opportunities. There's been a lot of research around this. So economist Sylvia Ann Hewlett in 2013 found that women have on average 3 times as many mentors as men, but men have twice as many sponsors, so folks who are really helping them climb that ladder actively. And a report by McKinsey and Company found that this number is far worse for BIPOC of all genders, so including men. It's also really common for sponsorship to fall prone to like me bias. So what we found in a 2019 report is that 71% of sponsors have primary sponsees of the same race and gender as them. So this is disproportionately going to groups of people who look like those who are already generally in the senior leadership positions in their organizations. So just to emphasize, it's really great that we are having this urge to mentor folks who are underrepresented in our field, but it sort of comes with this implication that minoritized people aren't already ready to take that next step towards leadership.
The benefits of sponsorship are not exclusive to a selective group, which is why sponsorship should be available to all. All advocacy is, at its core, an exercise in empathy. If sponsorship is distributed equitably among employees, it bolsters inclusion. You could hire diverse talent all day, but you only get the full benefits of that diversity in your organization if you give those people with different views and perspectives a voice to share their ideas or to lead based on their knowledge.
All right, so we've established that sponsorship is super great. And that brings us to the next question. If it's so great, how can we make sure that this is something we have in our lives and in our careers? So Jamie and I, during our research phase, came across several different models of sponsorship. And the first one that we want to talk about, that we're going to kind of come back to a few times as we continue forward here, is the idea of traditional sponsorship. So this is probably the form of sponsorship that is most well known. This is the one that a lot of the early research in the field highlights. So this is the leadership path. It is a rocket fuel relationship where a sponsor identifies someone who they feel like has high potential in the organization. And then they help guide that person and strategize and connect that person and get them opportunities to help them shine their way into a leadership role. So there's some really great things about this model. The sponsee in this model gets a lot of highly focused attention, and the sponsor gets the benefit of saying, hey, I identified this really great talent and ensured that my company has a leader for the future when someday I decide I want to retire. So that's really awesome about it. But in Jamie's and my work, we felt that there were a couple gaps left by this model. So there are 3 ones that we want to talk about. One is selection, that in this model, only people who are perceived as future leaders receive sponsorship. And if you happen to not have anyone at your capital T table who feels that you are the next in line to the throne, you just don't receive this sort of treatment. Another one is democracy, that advocacy can only come from that top level, capital T table level of influence in your organization. And the final thing, the third one, is ease, which is that this is a really heavy way of doing the relationship, that you are putting a lot of time and energy into your sponsee and hoping that they will turn into the leader that you're expecting them to. And it's a lot of energy and a lot of work to maintain this sort of relationship.
Our first thought was to fix the selection problem traditional sponsorship has. But traditional sponsorship is a little random for our tastes, so we wanted to make it formal so that folks could request it in their lives. So we thought of sponsorship as a program. When we began our journey, our mission was to encourage coworkers to advocate for one another. However, we weren't clear on what we wanted to do or how to accomplish this. We started collecting all sorts of data. We interviewed leadership to get a deeper understanding about visibility, opportunities, and pathways to get promoted within Method. We interviewed coworkers who started successful programs at their previous workplace. Then we analyzed the Kudos channel. In this channel, we praise employees for their work. Usually it's client-based feedback, but we wanted to see how much of the content was sponsorship. To fix the selection issue, we started focusing on building a program that connected sponsors to sponsees. Then we built quite an ambitious program because we wanted to make sure we could support self-selecting folks, pairing them with good sponsors and sponsees based on what their traits were. But neither of us felt like any of our work was leading us to the next step. We found that our program idea still only supported sponsors who had a seat at the faculty table, and it didn't really equip anyone with the knowledge of how to be an effective sponsor. But Hannah and I are quite motivated people and knew what we wanted to accomplish and how important it was to our organization. So after talking, planning, and failing a lot, we realized we got off track of our original mission.
So we looped back to an idea that captured us from the beginning, which is this concept of a workplace where people actively advocate for each other, which we're going to be calling sponsorship as a culture. So this is sort of the kind of environment that we wanted to be in, a place where your peers could just be like, hey, Jamie's doing a really great job, and raising that for notice to people who have influence to do something about it. But we weren't sure how to get started with that, so we went back to a model we found in our research, sponsorship as a culture. This idea comes from the writer Lara Hogan. She is herself an engineer, and she has this really great article I'd encourage you all to read called What Does Sponsorship Look Like? And I just have one excerpt from it, which I'm going to read here. Anytime you can, overtly or not, help those around you see the skill set or experience of someone, that is a sponsorship opportunity. So this would be if you are working alongside someone and you notice that they're doing a really great job with the way that they're designing their code, or if they're really helpful to their peers in code reviews, raising that up for notice.
So in sponsorship as a culture, we took a few different aspects of how to implement that at yourself. We recommend you start by taking the time to learn the opportunities you have accessible to yourself. In other words, what opportunities can you recommend someone for? You could do this by reviewing channels of communication at your company and listening to your coworkers you closely work with. Then you should also observe. Pay attention to the individuals around you to see where they shine and the skills they have that could be raised up for notice. To effectively advocate for someone, you should know their wants, interests, and needs in their career path. If you observe someone you don't know well, but you see them doing a great job, set up a coffee date with them to get insight to what they want. If you're uncertain about raising someone's name, share the opportunity or opportunities with that person to see if they're interested. You could be as aggressive or as relaxed about advocating for others in your workplace, or as you see fit. We believe in sponsorship for all as a democratic process that has all different types of levels. It could be something as simple as mentioning someone's accomplishments in a company channel, or citing an interesting topic or fact that you learned from someone recently to a group of influential people. It could also be suggesting someone to write a blog or talk at a company or team meeting in which they could demonstrate the work they've done. If you have the influence, you could recommend someone to be a good lead on a new project. I once heard that no voice is too soft when that voice speaks for others. However small or large your advocating is, it can make a huge impact to your organization.
So it's really great to talk about culture change, but one thing that Jamie and I immediately felt was the difficulty of enacting large-scale culture change and asking people to exhibit these behaviors that they may not have familiarity with and that might feel a little bit overwhelming to do, because as we said before, sponsorship is a high investment to place in a sponsee. So we tried thinking about it a slightly different way and broke it down into smaller parts. We were wondering to ourselves, what are the qualities that make up a sponsor that we could really make into discrete chunks that we could teach to people so that they could start working this into their own lives? For this, we turn to a third model, but the last one we'll be talking about today. So this is Herminia Ibarra's sponsorship spectrum, which is published in the Harvard Business Review. And we loved this model. So it takes us from the private sphere, so more one-on-one interactions, to full-on public. Everyone knows that you're championing this person, and really breaks down 5 key components of behavior that make up a sponsor. Whether that is something as personal as mentoring, where you are giving advice, that is something that a sponsor would do. Whether it's helping someone map out the path that they need to take to get from point A to point B in their careers. It could be connecting your sponsee to someone who you feel would be really a valuable resource for them, someone who could help them or maybe even sponsor them themselves. Then there's, of course, opportunity giver, which is a very visible one. So we're moving towards the public end here. This is if you have the ability to recommend someone for a project or for a role, or even to do something like write a blog post or lead a training, getting them that visible platform so that we can really see their skills. And then all the way up to advocate, where you might, suggest that someone be considered for a promotion or for a position or any other sort of advantageous track in work. So to put that into the culture up method, we started building a program, which we are calling Bring to the Table. Jamie's going to talk us through that a little bit.
So there are 3 parts to our workshop, and one is the participants, and then we have prompts and introspectives, and then we have discussion topics. In our first round, we've identified 3 coworkers to participate. We chose people we felt were open to experimenting, vulnerable enough to spark deep discussion, and different enough from one another to provide insight to how people receive this information. For our prompts and introspectives, prior to each discussions, participants will receive these prompts that give small insight to what we plan to discuss. The prompts will include introspective questions that will encourage participants to reflect on how they currently internalize the different aspects of each topic. We have structured our discussions based on the sponsorship spectrum that Hannah went through earlier, where each week we'll discuss the advice and tangible actions required on each level. Over the course, we hope to show how the advice decreases and the tangible actions increase throughout the spectrum. Sorry. In our first discussion on mentorship, our focus will be on examining the values, advice, and experiences our participants have that shape the way they currently advise. Our goal is to have our participants use that reflection to see how it could be beneficial for a potential sponsee. A good example is, here's what I've done to navigate a similar situation, but here's what I might have to make the most sense for you to do, given your usual approach. In Strategizer discussion, we want our participants to reflect on the past and where it led them. Did they plan where they were going, or did it happen by accident? We aim to push our participants to use their path to see where others are going, what tangible actions they could take to help them get where they need to be. An example of this is what you do next. If you want to apply for a manager role next year, this is what you should be aiming to do. As a connector, it is important to have an understanding of how you connect people without even realizing it. We want our participants in this discussion to identify ways they connect people and how to encourage others to do the same in their own ways. For example, Hannah has raised my name in several different opportunities that she had. That has led me to doing a talk like today. In our discussion on opportunity givers, we want to spark a discussion centered on how others have made them shine and review different ways to do this. As a result, we want our participants to leave with an understanding of the different opportunities that can let others shine and they can help others get. An example of this is Charlie. I put your name in the hat to be the tech lead on what is probably the most exciting new client opportunity this year. Do me proud. Our final discussion will be focused on the most investment our participants can provide to their sponsees. This will include an exploration on the way they have been advocated for and what ways they can advocate for others. An example to other folks at the table. Charlie has been killing it this year. I think their name should be in the hat for a manager role. We'd like to make sponsorship more approachable for everybody and empower folks to bring their peers' voices up in places where conversations are held. For our participants, we want to encourage them to advocate more, think differently, and be better teachers. For ourselves, we hope to learn more about our current employees and work cultures to develop new tools and better our program to adapt to our participants' needs. In our workspace, we would like to have, it would be ideal to have our employees advocate for one another. And this will ultimately spread and foster a culture of sponsorship.
All right, and that is our presentation for the day. If we have time, we'd be happy to take some questions or get some feedback from y'all. And if you don't get to talk to us and you want to reach out, I've got our emails up on the screen here. Feel free to shoot us a line. We love talking about this stuff. Thank you all.
I'll ask the first one and then I'll put it on you guys. When you're talking about sponsorship versus mentorship, do you think your direct manager should be one or the other, or should they kind of be just your direct manager? What are your thoughts on that?
They could be both or they could be separate. I think it's really your relationship and how that works and how their manager advocates for people.
And that's a good question, because it could be, like Jamie was saying, it could be someone who is, who you directly report to. But these relationships are things that we can sort of choose in our work lives as well. And just because someone is a really good manager for you and maybe they are a good mentor doesn't mean that they'll necessarily be the best advocate for you. They could be, but it's good to keep flexible on who fills these roles for you. I think in an ideal world, yes. But sometimes there's got to be a little bit of a blend there.
Of course. What other questions do we have from the audience? There we go.
Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for a beautiful presentation. My name is Lana, and I'm here with Kepler team. And my question for you is, how do you advocate for the importance of the change of the culture in the team? How do you raise awareness? How do you make people join you on this movement?
Yeah, so where we started was collecting the data around you of how you're currently doing it. And then we went a bunch of different directions of how to actually do this, because I think that's one of the harder parts of how do you get people to
agree, exactly, because
Yeah.
there's so much stuff going on. People are busy. How do you make this important move?
Yeah, so we think to start at a smaller approach of getting a few people on board, teaching them how to do it, how they could do it at the highest level and the lowest level. And I think that will tend to spread out, and hopefully we could repeat our process with other people to really understand how they could do it in their everyday lives without much effort. Because we want to make it easily accessible for everybody to do, even if you're not at the capital T table. We want you to be able to just recommend someone easily and with observing and understanding the opportunities you have, even as maybe like a junior developer or someone junior in the company, you have the ability to have your voice like heard by other people.
That's right. Okay, thank you so much.
So both of you ladies are with Method, and you're both engineers and developers. Was there any kind of buy-in you had to get from HR, diversity and inclusion? What other, if anybody's looking to do this and they're in a tech role, what other departments could they leverage to help change the culture?
Yeah, so I'm going to brag on Jamie for a minute because I had originally been researching this alone, and it's something that I brought up to Jamie and that we had conversations about, and she got really excited about and went to all of our senior leadership at Method and to our engineering directors and started interviewing them and talking to them about this idea until they actually told her that she would have reign to pursue building a program. And of course, then she was like, Hannah, do you want to do this with me? And I was like, of course I do. You're brilliant. Thank you. And so, yeah, for us, it just started with having small conversations, I think. And we're very fortunate to have such supportive leadership at Method. I think, though, that seeing the benefits of the sponsorship relationship in research, and especially because so many companies are interested in bolstering not only the diversity of their staff, but also the inclusion and equity that they have in their staffs. This is a really compelling tool to make that happen and to make that sustainable. So I think if I were trying to sell it to someone who are more resistant to that, that's probably the angle I would take. Do you have anything you want to add?
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much.